What if Dunkirk is not the untouchable war masterpiece everyone claims it is? Nolan gave us ticking clocks, roaring aircraft, and beautiful tension, but older filmmakers moved real armies, real ships, and skies packed with practical machines. By number one, you may wonder whether modern war cinema has actually moved forward, or simply become louder. Before we begin, like this video, share it with a fellow movie fan, and subscribe to the channel. Number 35. The Sea Wolves. At first, this sounds less like an epic and more like an outrageous pub story. Retired British officers are asked to conduct a secret raid because official forces cannot be seen anywhere near neutral Portuguese territory. Set during the Second World War and inspired by a real covert operation, the film follows aging members of the Calcutta Light Horse as they travel to Goa, pose as harmless tourists, and target a German merchant ship transmitting Allied shipping information. What makes the story work is the contrast. These men are not introduced as unstoppable commandos. They complain, drink, joke about their knees, and appear badly suited to a dangerous mission. Yet that is exactly why the Germans underestimate them. Gregory Peck gives the operation authority, while David Niven and Roger Moore bring charm that hides the pressure gathering beneath the surface. The signature sequence comes when the veterans board the vessel at night. The raid is not filmed like a superhero assault. It is messy, tense, and dependent on timing. One mistake could expose Britain's involvement and turn a secret mission into an international crisis. As charges are planted and guards begin to understand what is happening, the movie suddenly reveals the steel beneath its gentlemanly surface. Released in 1980, The Sea Wolves arrived after the golden age of giant war adventures. Even so, its ships, locations, and ensemble cast give it a weight that many digital thrillers lack. Dunkirk may race against a clock, but this forgotten mission proves suspense can also come from watching ordinary men quietly become dangerous again. Number 34. The Eagle has landed. Imagine an enemy commando unit landing in rural England with one impossible goal: capture Winston Churchill before anyone realizes the invasion has already begun. That bold idea drives this 1976 thriller, adapted from Jack Higgins's novel. Michael Caine plays Colonel Kurt Steiner, a German officer chosen to lead paratroopers into an English village, while Donald Sutherland appears as an Irish revolutionary whose local knowledge makes the operation possible. Instead of presenting every German character as a simple villain, the film gives Steiner a personal code and a growing awareness that the mission may be political theater rather than sound strategy. His men enter disguised as Polish troops, blend into village life, and almost succeed because the setting feels too peaceful for danger. The movie creates tension by placing military planning beside church bells, cottages, and curious civilians. Its most remembered sequence begins when a child falls near a water wheel. A disguised soldier exposes his German uniform while attempting a rescue, and the entire operation starts collapsing in seconds. From there, the village becomes a trapped battlefield. The church siege is especially effective because the stone walls and narrow windows make every movement feel final. The Eagle has landed does not have the beaches or aircraft formations of Dunkirk, but it has something Nolan's film deliberately avoids: a complicated duel between personalities. Steiner, the villagers, British troops, and the plotters above them all want different outcomes. The movie becomes an old-school epic in miniature, proving that scale is not only measured by extras. Sometimes it is measured by how many loyalties can collide inside one small English village. If these forgotten war films deserve a second life, tap like and subscribe before the next mission begins. Share your favorite title in the comments, because the countdown becomes much bigger from here. Number 33. The Enemy Below. Far from crowded beaches, two captains study each other across an empty ocean. One commands an American destroyer escort, the other controls a German U-boat. Released in 1957, The Enemy Below turns their duel into a deadly game of patience. Robert Mitchum plays Captain Morrell, a merchant officer whose unusual methods make his crew doubt him, while Kurt Jürgens gives the submarine commander intelligence, fatigue, and surprising dignity. The story is simple enough to fit on a map. The surface ship must locate and destroy the submarine before the submarine slips away or strikes first. Yet the film continually shifts between both vessels, allowing viewers to understand the pressures on each side. Sonar pings become questions. Depth charges become answers. Every change of course reveals what one captain believes about the other. Its famous sequence comes during the final confrontation, when damage, fire, and desperation push both ships toward a collision. The scene feels huge because the movie has spent so long making us understand the confined lives inside each vessel. Steel groans, sailors rush through smoke, and both commanders recognize that winning may require sacrificing the ship beneath their feet. Unlike many war adventures of its decade, the film refuses easy triumph. The captains are enemies, but neither is treated as foolish. Their respect grows from professional skill rather than sentimental speeches. Dunkirk uses distance and anonymity to show war as a machine. The enemy below uses two faces, two control rooms, and one narrowing stretch of water. Its practical naval photography and disciplined pacing turn a tactical chase into something almost mythic. Number 32. The Desert Rats. Heat can be as frightening as gunfire, and this film makes the North African desert feel like an enemy with no uniform. Released in 1953, The Desert Rats dramatizes the defense of Tobruk, where Allied troops endured repeated attacks while surrounded by Axis forces. Richard Burton plays a British captain assigned to shape inexperienced Australian soldiers into a unit capable of holding the line. Nothing comes easily. The men are exhausted, supplies are limited, and the position appears impossible to defend. Their commander knows that speeches will not stop tanks, so the story focuses on discipline, night patrols, and small acts of endurance. James Mason returns as Field Marshal Rommel, bringing calm authority to the opposing side and giving the conflict a human face without reducing its threat. The standout sequence is a night raid against enemy positions. Darkness removes the grand view of the battlefield, leaving only silhouettes, wire, sudden light, and men trying not to lose direction. Burton's captain must control troops who are terrified but cannot show it. The action is direct, practical, and free of the weightless movement often seen in modern studio battles. The film also understands that a siege is mostly waiting. Men joke because silence is worse. Officers study maps they cannot trust. Every vehicle on the horizon might bring supplies or another attack. That slow pressure gives the larger clashes meaning. Dunkirk presents soldiers trapped beside the sea, looking toward home. The Desert Rats traps them against open land that offers no shelter at all. Its scale comes from emptiness, from the sight of a few defenses facing a horizon large enough to swallow everyone. The result is not polished spectacle. It is sunburned, stubborn, and deeply old-fashioned in the best sense. Number 31. Sink the Bismarck. Before satellites and computer screens, an entire naval hunt could be directed through maps, telephones, pins, and exhausted officers working beneath London. Sink the Bismarck, released in 1960, follows Britain's desperate attempt to locate and stop Germany's most feared battleship before it can devastate Atlantic shipping. Kenneth Moore plays the Naval Operations Director, coordinating the chase while carrying private grief he refuses to discuss. The movie constantly moves between command rooms, warships, aircraft, and the Bismarck itself. This creates a broad strategic view without losing human tension. A single, uncertain report can redirect fleets. A delayed message can leave a convoy exposed. The famous war room scenes make administration feel thrilling, because every marker on the wall represents hundreds of lives somewhere beyond the camera. Its most powerful action arrives when torpedo aircraft attack through terrible weather. The pilots fly low over violent water, searching for a ship that seems almost impossible to stop. Later, damaged steering traps the Bismarck in a fatal circle, and the pursuing British vessels close in. The final engagement is filmed with models, full-size decks, smoke, water, and carefully matched footage that gives the battle a physical force. The film avoids turning the pursuit into a celebration. British success carries a cost, and the memory of HMS Hood hangs over every decision. The command room officer is not simply pushing pieces toward victory. He is processing loss while pretending to remain untouched. Dunkirk narrows war into immediate survival. Sink the Bismarck expands it into an ocean-sized puzzle, where unseen crews depend on information traveling through static and uncertainty. Its clipped dialogue, practical ships, and relentless map-room rhythm show how an old film can create global scale without ever losing the pressure inside one quiet room. Number 30. The Battle of the River Plate. Long before a shot is fired, the Atlantic already feels like a chessboard. The Battle of the River Plate, made in 1956 by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, follows the hunt for the German pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee. Rather than inventing a fictional superweapon, the film builds its drama around the real campaign that ended near the coast of Uruguay. The opening shows the Graf Spee stopping merchant ships and taking prisoners before sending vessels beneath the waves. Captain Langsdorff is presented as disciplined and controlled, which makes the danger more believable. He is not screaming orders for effect. He studies information, calculates distance, and trusts that his larger guns can keep British cruisers away. On the Allied side, Three smaller ships must coordinate perfectly, because none can win alone. The famous battle sequence begins with smoke on the horizon and grows into a wide naval engagement. The British ships divide their approach, forcing the Graf Spee to turn its weapons in different directions. Shell splashes rise beside real vessels, signal flags snap in the wind, and officers make choices with incomplete information. The action is patient enough for the viewer to understand the tactics, yet urgent enough to feel every correction of course. What follows is even more unusual. The damaged German ship enters Montevideo, and the conflict becomes a contest of diplomacy, rumor, and psychological pressure. Crowds wait along the harbor while both sides attempt to control what Langsdorff believes is waiting outside. Dunkirk places civilians and soldiers on the same strip of coast. This older film does something equally ambitious by turning an international harbor into a stage watched by the world. The final scuttling of the Graf Spee is not presented as a simple victory image. It is the end of a strategic trap, filmed with solemn distance. The movie understands that the greatest war stories are sometimes decided by what commanders fear, not only by what they can see. Number 29. The Cruel Sea. No grand speech can prepare a sailor for the Atlantic, and The Cruel Sea refuses to pretend otherwise. Released in 1953 and adapted from Nicholas Monsarrat's novel, it follows the crew of the corvette Compass Rose from the early uncertainty of the war through years of convoy duty. Jack Hawkins plays Captain Erickson, a decent officer gradually worn down by responsibility. The ship is small, the ocean is enormous, and German submarines can strike without being seen. New officers arrive with little experience. Sailors become close because they have no space to remain strangers. The film pays attention to watches, weather, engine trouble, exhaustion, and the endless movement required to protect merchant vessels. That detail creates a realism more impressive than spectacle for its own sake. Its most famous and painful sequence arrives when a U-boat is believed to be beneath survivors struggling in the water. Erickson must choose whether to drop depth charges. Saving the men could allow the submarine to escape and attack another convoy. Attacking may place those same survivors in terrible danger. Hawkins plays the moment without theatrical shouting. His face reveals what command costs when every available decision feels wrong. Later, the Compass Rose is lost, and the crew must rebuild their lives aboard another vessel. The war does not pause to honor what they have already endured. That repetition is the film's central truth. The Atlantic campaign was not one heroic afternoon, but a long test of nerves, machinery, and human limits. Dunkirk overwhelms the audience through sound and compressed time. The Cruel Sea works through accumulation. A wet deck, a missing ship, an empty bunk, and another convoy order slowly become heavier than any booming score. Filmed partly aboard an actual corvette, it has the texture of steel and salt rather than studio perfection. Its title does not describe only the enemy, it describes the battlefield itself, indifferent to flags and equally ready to take everyone. Number 28. The Dam Busters. An engineer rolling marbles across a basin does not look like the beginning of an epic, yet that quiet experiment becomes one of British cinema's most celebrated wartime missions. The Dam Busters, released in 1955, tells the story of Barnes Wallis and the Royal Air Force crews chosen to attack heavily protected dams using a bouncing bomb. The first half belongs to problem solving. Michael Redgrave's Wallace faces failed tests, skeptical officials, technical limits, and the terrifying knowledge that pilots will eventually trust their lives to his calculations. The weapon must strike at the correct speed, height, distance, and rotation. Each requirement sounds unreasonable until training makes it possible. Then the film shifts to Richard Todd's wing commander Guy Gibson and the air crews. They practice low-level flying over water, learning to hold their aircraft at a height that leaves almost no room for error. The famous raid sequence is built around repetition with variation. A bomber approaches. Searchlights find it. Defensive fire rises. The crew attempts to line up the towers. Some bombs miss. Some aircraft do not return. Every run becomes more tense because viewers now understand the exact procedure. The image everyone remembers is the bomb skipping across the reservoir like a stone before striking the dam. There is no digital camera flying around it. The effect is simple, readable, and grounded in the physical world. When a dam finally breaks, the film does not allow the celebration to erase the empty places waiting back at the base. Dunkirk also depends on aircraft, timing, and men operating machines under pressure. But the Dam Busters spends far more time teaching the audience how the mission works. That patience turns the climax into a test we can follow, rather than a storm we merely experience. Its emotional force comes from preparation, and its final silence belongs to those who completed the mission and those who could not come home. Number 27. 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. The title gives away the duration of the attack, but not the enormous effort required to reach it. 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, released in 1944, dramatizes the Doolittle raid, in which American B-25 bombers launched from an aircraft carrier to strike Japan. Van Johnson plays pilot Ted Lawson, while Spencer Tracy appears as Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. Much of the film follows training and separation. Crews learn short-distance takeoffs without being told exactly why. Families sense that something unusual is coming, but the men cannot explain. Once the bombers are loaded aboard the carrier Hornet, the secret becomes clear. These land-based aircraft are about to attempt something they were never designed to do. The unforgettable sequence comes when the task force is spotted earlier than planned. Doolittle orders the launch despite rough weather and the increased distance to China. One by one, heavily loaded bombers race along the short deck. The carrier drops beneath their wheels. Ocean fills the frame, and each aircraft struggles into the air with almost no margin. The practical photography makes every takeoff feel like a separate miracle. The attack itself is brief, just as the title promises. The longer ordeal begins afterward. Low fuel, darkness, bad weather, and uncertainty scatter the crews across China. Lawson's aircraft crash lands, and the film becomes a survival story focused on injury, friendship, and the difficult road home. Because it was made while the war was still underway, the movie carries the direct emotional purpose of its time. Yet it is more thoughtful than simple propaganda. It emphasizes teamwork and the cost paid after the headlines. Dunkirk shows rescue as the goal. 30 Seconds Over Tokyo shows that reaching the target may only be the beginning. Its scale comes from turning a few seconds above a city into a journey spanning oceans, carriers, airfields, villages, and lives permanently changed. Number 26. 12 O'Clock High. Leadership looks impressive from a distance. Up close, it can destroy the person required to practice it. 12 O'Clock High, released in 1949, begins with an abandoned airfield and a souvenir that pulls a former officer back into memory. From there, the film follows an American bomber group in England whose morale has collapsed after repeated losses. Gregory Peck plays General Frank Savage, sent to transform the struggling unit. He replaces sympathy with strict discipline, removes popular officers, and demands standards the men initially hate. His methods seem harsh, but the film makes clear that poor performance in the air has consequences no speech can repair. Savage's challenge is to make the crews believe they can function together again. The combat scenes use actual wartime aerial footage, and that gives the bombing missions a frightening authenticity. Aircraft break formation, engines fail, and defensive fighters appear from above. The 12 O'Clock High position of the title. Yet the movie's famous moments are often quieter. Savage sits waiting for crews to return, counting aircraft by sound. Later, after carrying the burden too long, he is unable to climb into his own bomber. The commander who demanded endurance from everyone else discovers that willpower has limits. Unlike many war films, this one is less interested in a single target than in the machinery of morale. Men need confidence, but confidence built on denial will not survive the next mission. Peck's performance shows a leader slowly absorbing the fear he has forbidden his men to display. Dunkirk strips away personal history to create collective tension. 12 O'Clock High does the opposite. It studies how one personality can hold a unit together and what happens when that personality begins to fracture. The aircraft are magnificent, but the true battlefield is Savage's face, as he waits for engines that may never return. Number 25. Midway. A battle fought across hundreds of miles can still depend on a few men reading fragments of code in a windowless room. Midway, released in 1976, dramatizes the carrier clash that changed the direction of the Pacific War. The film combines a large ensemble: Charlton Heston, Henry Fonda, Robert Mitchum, Glenn Ford, Toshiro Mifune, and others, with a broad view of planning on both sides. The story begins before the fleets meet. American intelligence officers suspect that the Japanese target, identified only as AF, is Midway Island. Their solution is wonderfully simple. Have Midway send an uncoded message claiming its water system has failed. When Japanese traffic reports that AF is short of water, the trap is confirmed. That scene is not visually spectacular, but it gives the coming battle its foundation. Knowledge becomes a weapon before a single aircraft leaves a deck. Once the carriers move into position, the film becomes a chain of searches, delays, and fatal timing. Scout planes miss sectors. Reports arrive late. Bombers are armed, rearmed, and caught during vulnerable moments. The famous attack on the Japanese carriers is powerful because the audience understands how briefly the opportunity exists. American dive bombers drop almost vertically through defensive fire, and the decks below are crowded with fueled aircraft and equipment. The production uses models, full-size carrier footage, and material from earlier films and wartime archives. The mixture is sometimes visible, but the tactical clarity remains impressive. You always know why one decision matters, and why a delay of minutes can decide the day. Dunkirk divides its story into land, sea, and air. Midway connects those same elements through information. Pilots cannot see the whole battle. Admirals cannot control every pilot. Codebreakers influence ships they never board. The result is an old-fashioned military panorama where victory does not come from one invincible hero. It comes from imperfect people, making enough correct choices before the enemy does. Number 24. Battle of Britain. Few films have placed so many real vintage aircraft into the sky, and then allowed the audience to watch them move. Battle of Britain, released in 1969, recreates the aerial campaign in which the Royal Air Force resisted Germany's attempt to gain control over southern England. Its cast is enormous, but the machines and the formations are the true stars. The narrative moves between British command centers, German headquarters, airfields, pilots, ground crews, and civilians. Laurence Olivier plays Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding with restrained authority, while Trevor Howard, Michael Caine, Christopher Plummer, Robert Shaw, and many others represent different levels of the defense. The film avoids creating one fictional savior. Instead, it shows a system stretched close to failure. Its famous sequences come in the air. Squadrons cross the coast, contrails carve lines across blue sky, and the camera follows aircraft through turns that feel heavy because they are heavy. The production assembled a working collection of planes and used aerial photography rather than filling the frame with weightless digital objects. When formations break into individual duels, the sky becomes both beautiful and terrifying. One of the most memorable moments is almost comic in its understatement. After a German controller gives a rapid order, the response is simply, "Repeat, please." That brief exchange captures the confusion hidden beneath military confidence. Elsewhere, radar stations, observers, and plotting rooms show that the pilots are only the visible edge of a much larger defense network. The final stretch lets music and imagery carry the story as the air battle reaches its height. London below appears vulnerable, while pilots above fight in a space with no cover and little time. Dunkirk offers a handful of aircraft as symbols of hope. Battle of Britain gives the sky an entire cast. Its practical scale is difficult to repeat today because the film does not merely imitate aviation. It records real machines performing together, creating a moving historical pageant that still feels dangerously alive. Number 23. Tora! Tora! Instead of beginning with a hero, this film begins with systems failing. Tora! 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 Released in 1970, reconstructs the road to Pearl Harbor from both the American and Japanese perspectives. American and Japanese directors handled their respective sections, giving the film a balanced structure unusual for a major studio production of its era. The first half is built from warnings that do not connect. Diplomats negotiate, while military planners prepare. American radar operators notice an approaching formation, but the report is dismissed as expected aircraft. A Japanese submarine is spotted near the harbor, yet the information does not move quickly enough. Everyone possesses a piece of the truth, but no one assembles it before the attack begins. Then the movie unleashes its famous centerpiece. Aircraft skim over water, torpedoes drop toward battleships, hangars erupt in smoke, and sailors race across decks while the harbor becomes chaos. The staging remains astonishing, because so much is physical. Full-size aircraft, large sets, controlled explosions, stunt work, and detailed miniatures create a sequence with real weight. The camera often holds wide enough for viewers to understand the scale rather than cutting away from it. The title comes from the coded signal announcing that surprise has been achieved. Yet the film does not present the operation as effortless genius. Japanese commanders worry about missing American carriers, while Admiral Yamamoto understands that tactical success may awaken a far larger opponent. The closing thought is therefore not victory but warning. Dunkirk places viewers inside confusion and withholds strategic explanation. Tora, Tora, Tora does the reverse. It shows exactly how confusion was created, passed along, and ignored. The attack is spectacular, but the most disturbing part is knowing how many chances existed to reduce the damage. This is old-school epic filmmaking as historical machinery. Offices, radios, ships, aircraft, and human assumptions, all moving toward the same morning. Number 22. The Dirty Dozen. No respectable commander would choose these men, which is precisely why they are chosen. The Dirty Dozen, released in 1967, follows Major Reisman, played by Lee Marvin, as he trains 12 military prisoners for a mission behind enemy lines. Their target is a French chateau, where senior German officers are expected to gather before the Normandy invasion. The first half is less about combat than controlled rebellion. The prisoners distrust Reisman, hate military authority, and clash with one another. Charles Bronson, Jim Brown, John Cassavetes, Telly Savalas, Donald Sutherland, and the rest create a group that feels unstable enough to fail at any moment. Reisman does not transform them through kindness. He gives them a common enemy, clear consequences, and the possibility of earning something back. The famous training sequence during war games proves that the group has become effective, disguised, improvising, and ignored by officers who assume they do not belong. The men capture an opposing headquarters. Donald Sutherland's accidental impersonation of a general gives the film one of its funniest scenes, but the humor also demonstrates the unit's strength. They survive by adapting faster than everyone around them. The chateau assault shifts the tone. The team enters in German uniforms, seals exits, and attempts to complete a plan with many moving parts. Once the alarm is raised, the elegant building becomes a maze of staircases, cellars, rooftops, and defensive positions. The mission grows harsher, and the earlier jokes make the losses feel heavier. Dunkirk finds nobility in ordinary soldiers trying to escape. The Dirty Dozen finds usefulness in men the institution has already rejected. Its epic quality comes from the collision between a rough character drama and a huge final operation. It is not morally neat, and it does not pretend that war automatically improves people. It simply asks whether damaged men can perform one necessary act together, and what remains of them afterward. Number 21. Battle of the Bulge. The geography may not always satisfy historians, but few films capture the terrifying visual idea of a massive armored attack as boldly as Battle of the Bulge. Released in 1965 and photographed in widescreen, it dramatizes Germany's surprise winter offensive through a fictionalized group of officers and soldiers on both sides. Henry Fonda plays an American intelligence officer who sees signs of the coming attack before his superiors accept them. Robert Shaw plays Colonel Hessler, an experienced German tank commander ordered to lead a final push, fueled by ambition, secrecy, and limited gasoline. Their conflict is not a direct personal duel. It is a contest between prediction and momentum. The most famous scene occurs before battle. Young German tank crews stand in formation and sing the Panzerlied as Hessler watches. The men appear disciplined, confident, and frighteningly united. Yet Hessler notices what the song cannot hide. Many are too young to understand the campaign they are entering. The sequence turns music into a warning and gives the enemy force an identity before the tanks begin moving. When the offensive starts, long columns of armor roll across open ground. The film was shot in Spain rather than the snowy Ardennes, and its tanks are not exact matches for the historical vehicles, but the physical scale is undeniable. Real machines throw dust, crush obstacles, and move in coordinated lines. Later, the battle reaches a fuel depot, where the German advance confronts the resource it desperately needs. Dunkirk is admired for limiting information and placing viewers inside survival. Battle of the Bulge is built like a giant campaign map brought to life. It moves from headquarters to roads, villages, tank fields, and collapsing defenses. The result may be broad rather than precise, but it has the confidence of an era willing to fill the horizon with actual steel and let the audience feel an army coming. Number 20. Anzio. The strangest thing about the landing at Anzio is how quiet it first appears. In this 1968 film, Allied troops reach the Italian coast with little resistance, and for a few precious hours, the road inland seems open. Robert Mitchum plays war correspondent Dick Ennis, a veteran observer who immediately suspects that hesitation will turn opportunity into disaster. That is exactly what happens. Commanders choose consolidation over a rapid advance, giving German forces time to regroup and seal the beachhead. The movie follows Ennis and a patrol that moves beyond the lines, discovers enemy preparations, and then struggles to return through territory filling with troops. Peter Falk brings nervous energy as Corporal Rubino, a man whose survival instincts are sharper than his military manners. The signature sequence begins in a ruined town where the patrol is trapped by a sniper. Empty windows become threats, movement stops, and every attempt to locate the shooter creates another risk. Rather than presenting battle as a clean clash between formations, the film narrows war into a puzzle of walls, streets, and invisible angles. Later scenes widen again to show artillery, armor, and the growing pressure around the Allied position. Anzio is critical of command, without pretending that any single decision could make war simple. Ennis has seen enough campaigns to know that bold plans become cautious once officers fear losing what they have gained. His frustration gives the story its bitter edge. Soldiers on the ground pay for delays made far behind them. Dunkirk begins after a strategic failure and focuses on escape. Anzio shows failure being created in real time. The beaches are reached, the enemy is absent, and the opening seems almost too good to be true. Then time closes the door. That structure gives the movie a tragic inevitability, while its real locations, large formations, and practical battle scenes preserve the physical scale of old studio warfare. Number 19. Is Paris Burning? A city becomes the central character in Is Paris Burning, the international epic released in 1966. Based on the liberation of Paris, the film gathers French resistance fighters, Allied commanders, German officers, civilians, politicians, and an enormous cast of stars into one sprawling story. The question in the title comes from the order to destroy the city if it cannot be held. The movie moves through apartments, police stations, streets, headquarters, and underground networks as resistance groups prepare an uprising. Their political differences matter almost as much as the occupying force. Some want immediate action, others fear a failed revolt will bring catastrophe before Allied troops arrive. Jean-Paul Belmondo, Alain Delon, Yves Montand, Orson Welles, Kirk Douglas, and many more appear, but Paris itself holds the narrative together. Its best-known scenes show barricades rising and crowds reclaiming public spaces, while German forces attempt to maintain control. Tanks move through famous avenues, bells ring, and ordinary citizens watch history changing outside their windows. The arrival of Allied and Free French units turns the final movement into a massive urban pageant. Because so much was filmed in Paris, the architecture gives every image authority no constructed digital city could completely replace. Yet the film's most tense thread belongs to General Dietrich von Choltitz, who receives instructions to leave Paris in ruins. The drama comes from whether obedience, self-preservation, military reality, or some remaining sense of civilization will determine his choice. The repeated demand, "Has Paris been set ablaze?" hangs over the celebration. Dunkirk is about reaching home. Is Paris Burning? Is about preventing home from disappearing. Its black and white photography gives the recreation a newsreel immediacy, while the size of the production turns streets, bridges, and monuments into pieces on a military board. The film may be crowded, but that crowd is the point. Liberation does not belong to one hero. It arrives through thousands of people pushing history in the same direction. Number 18. The Train. Steel, steam, and art collide in The Train, John Frankenheimer's 1964 thriller. Burt Lancaster plays Paul Labiche, a French railway inspector and resistance member ordered to stop a train carrying stolen paintings toward Germany. The cargo includes works taken from French museums, and the mission raises a difficult question. How many human lives should be risked to save objects, even priceless ones? Paul Scofield plays Colonel von Waldheim, the German officer determined to move the collection before Paris is liberated. He treats the paintings as proof that civilization belongs to those powerful enough to possess it. Labiche initially resists sacrificing railway workers for canvases, but once von Waldheim begins punishing opposition and forcing the train forward, the struggle becomes about more than art. It becomes a contest over who has the right to define France. The movie's famous sequences are built from real locomotives. Trains crash through barriers, switch tracks, reverse direction, and thunder past stations, while resistance workers create an elaborate illusion that the cargo is already crossing Germany. Signs are changed, station names are replaced, and routes are manipulated so the German guards believe they are moving east when they are circling through France. One enormous derailment was filmed with an actual train, and the weight is unmistakable. Metal does not float or vanish in a cloud of pixels. It bends, tears, and keeps moving long after control is lost. Lancaster performs demanding physical action around tracks, engines, and machinery, making Labiche seem like a man who understands every bolt in his battlefield. Dunkirk uses vehicles as instruments of rescue. The train turns the railway itself into a resistance network. Its suspense comes from schedules, switches, water, coal, and the stubborn momentum of heavy machines. By the final confrontation, rows of crates sit beside the track like silent witnesses. The paintings cannot thank anyone, yet the film makes their survival represent a country refusing to let its memory be carried away. Number 17. Where Eagles Dare. Snowy mountains, secret identities, double agents, a fortress, and a cable car hanging over empty space. Where Eagles Dare does not believe in modest entertainment. Released in 1968, it stars Richard Burton as Major Smith and Clint Eastwood as Lieutenant Schaefer, members of a team sent to rescue an American general from an inaccessible alpine castle. The mission immediately feels suspicious. The general knows sensitive information about the planned invasion of Europe, yet several members of the rescue team behave as though they are following different instructions. Once the commandos parachute into the mountains, unexplained deaths and hidden loyalties turn the operation into a puzzle. Smith always appears to know more than he says, while Schaefer reacts with the calm efficiency of a man who has decided questions can wait. The castle infiltration is pure old-school adventure. The team uses uniforms, explosives, climbing equipment, vehicles, and nerve rather than futuristic technology. Burton's long interrogation room scene is the narrative centerpiece. Surrounded by officers and supposed traitors, Smith changes the meaning of the mission sentence by sentence, exposing a network while making everyone in the room doubt everyone else. Then comes the famous cable car fight. Men struggle on top of a moving car suspended over the Alps, with wind, cables, and the drop below turning every movement into danger. The stunt has a physical tension modern green screen work rarely matches because the actors and doubles appear connected to a real machine in a real landscape. Dunkirk is intentionally stripped of spy movie pleasure. Where Eagles Dare offers the opposite. Elaborate deception, bold action, sharp star power, and a mission designed to become more impossible with every revelation. Yet its scale is not empty decoration. The mountain setting makes escape genuinely difficult, and the castle's isolation explains why trickery is as important as weapons. By the time the survivors reach the airfield, the film has delivered enough plot for 3 modern thrillers and enough practical action to remind viewers what event movie once meant. Number 16. The Guns of Navarone. 6 men, 2 enormous guns, 1 occupied island, and a deadline that could decide whether trapped British troops escape. The Guns of Navarone, released in 1961, turns that simple mission into one of the defining commando epics. Gregory Peck plays mountain expert Keith Mallory. David Niven is explosives specialist Miller, and Anthony Quinn brings fierce pride to Greek resistance fighter Andrea Stavros. Their task is to infiltrate the fictional island of Navarone and destroy fortress guns controlling a vital sea passage. Before reaching the target, the team must survive a storm, scale a cliff considered impossible, cross enemy territory, manage injury, and discover who is betraying them. Every obstacle places pressure on the group's fragile trust. Mallory and Stavros carry an old grievance, while Miller openly questions the moral decisions required by command. The cliff climb is the film's first great set piece. Rain lashes the rock as ropes strain, and men disappear into darkness below. The sequence establishes that the mission is not difficult because the screenplay says so. The landscape itself rejects them. Later, the group enters the fortress and moves through tunnels, gun chambers, and guarded passages, while the evacuation fleet approaches. The signature climax belongs to Miller's explosives. The guns appear ready to fire as ships enter range, but hidden charges transform the entire mountainside. Massive machinery, stone, water, and smoke fill the screen. The destruction is satisfying because the film has made viewers understand the route, the timing, and the personal cost of reaching that point. Dunkirk is about ordinary survival, rather than larger-than-life heroes. The Guns of Navarone proudly embraces the expert team myth, yet it complicates that fantasy with arguments about sacrifice, revenge, and responsibility. The characters are capable, but never comfortable. Its landscapes, fortress sets, and patient suspense make the mission feel carved into the island itself. Modern films often make impossible action look easy. This one makes expertise look exhausting. Number 15. The Great Escape. A prison camp becomes a construction site, a theater company, a forgery office, and a battlefield of patience in The Great Escape. Released in 1963, the film follows Allied prisoners placed in a supposedly escape-proof camp. Their answer is not 1 tunnel but 3, named Tom, Dick, and Harry, because they expect discovery and plan for redundancy. Richard Attenborough's Bartlett organizes the operation. James Garner finds materials. Donald Pleasance creates documents. Charles Bronson digs despite his fear of enclosed spaces. And Steve McQueen's Hilts repeatedly tests the perimeter. The ensemble structure turns escape into a collective craft. Dirt must be hidden, uniforms altered, maps drawn, guards distracted, and hundreds of small objects stolen or manufactured without exposing the larger plan. The famous tunnel sequence builds tension through practical detail. Men crawl in narrow darkness, while the exit is discovered to be short of the forest. They must cross open ground one by one, timed against the guards' movements. The escape is thrilling, but the film refuses to treat freedom as the end of the story. Trains, roads, checkpoints, and language mistakes begin separating the men almost immediately. McQueen's motorcycle chase became the iconic image. Hilts races across fields, jumps barriers, and attempts to reach neutral territory while soldiers close in. The stunt work gives the sequence speed and weight, but it is the wire fence that makes it unforgettable. Freedom is visible on the other side, almost close enough to touch. Dunkirk follows thousands trying to leave one exposed place. The Great Escape follows individuals scattering across an entire country, each carrying a different plan and a different chance. Its length allows the audience to enjoy the ingenuity before confronting the cost. That tonal shift is why the movie lasts. It begins like a grand adventure assembled from teamwork, and ends as a tribute to courage that could not guarantee survival. Number 14. The Bridge on the River Kwai. Pride builds the bridge long before bamboo and timber do. David Lean's The Bridge on the River Kwai, released in 1957, follows British prisoners ordered to construct a railway bridge for their Japanese captors. Alec Guinness plays Colonel Nicholson, an officer whose devotion to rules and discipline slowly turns captivity into a dangerous test of identity. At first, Nicholson resists Colonel Saito's demand that British officers perform manual labor. Their confrontation is a battle of wills fought through heat, confinement, ceremony, and humiliation. When Saito gives way, Nicholson decides his men will build a proper bridge as proof of British professionalism. The project restores order and morale, but the achievement begins serving the enemy. That contradiction grows more disturbing as Nicholson becomes emotionally invested in perfection. Meanwhile, William Holden's Shears escapes and is later pushed into returning with a commando team assigned to destroy the bridge. The two stories move toward each other without Nicholson understanding that his proud creation has become a target. The famous final sequence begins with hidden explosives, a train approaching, and the river level dropping enough to expose the wire. Nicholson notices something beneath the water and follows it toward the detonator. Each step increases the tension because the audience knows the bridge's builder is about to confront the purpose of his work. The train's whistle, the commandos in hiding, Saito's ceremony, and Nicholson's dawning realization collide in one of cinema's great climaxes. Dunkirk treats time as a mechanical trap. The Bridge on the River Kwai makes character the trap. Nicholson is brave, disciplined, and tragically unable to see when those virtues have changed direction. Lean's jungle locations, full-scale bridge, marching columns, and controlled pacing create spectacle. But the final word belongs to moral confusion. The bridge is magnificent. That is exactly the problem. Number 13. The Young Lions. War looks different depending on which uniform, country, and illusion a man begins with. The Young Lions, released in 1958, follows three soldiers whose lives move toward the same conflict from opposite sides. Marlon Brando plays Christian Diestel, a German ski instructor drawn into the military. Montgomery Clift and Dean Martin play Americans Noah Ackerman and Michael Whiteacre, one facing prejudice inside his own unit, and the other trying to escape his fear through charm. The film's power comes from duration. Christian does not begin as a fanatic. He imagines service as honor, and gradually sees corruption, cruelty, and defeat erode that belief. Noah enters the army already treated as an outsider because he is Jewish. His struggle is not only against the enemy abroad, but against men beside him who question whether he belongs. Michael, a successful entertainer, must decide whether comfort has made him a coward. Their stories pass through North Africa, training camps, occupied Europe, hospitals, and the collapsing German front. One famous sequence shows Noah enduring a brutal fight with fellow soldiers who have targeted him. He refuses to stay down, not because victory will solve everything, but because surrender would confirm the identity they have forced upon him. The final movement reaches a concentration camp as American troops confront evidence that destroys any remaining distance from the conflict. Christian, exhausted and disillusioned, moves through the ruins of the cause he once served. The meeting of storylines is brief, bitter, and far from heroic fantasy. Dunkirk removes political explanation to focus on immediate experience. The Young Lions insists that experience is shaped by politics, prejudice, class, and personal choice. Its epic scale is emotional as much as physical. Three men cross years and continents, and the film asks not simply who survives, but what each one understands when the uniforms finally lose their power. Number 12. The Victors. Winning a war does not guarantee that anyone feels victorious. Carl Foreman's The Victors, released in 1963, follows an American infantry unit from Britain through Italy, France, and Germany. Instead of one central hero, the film presents a chain of encounters that gradually strips away romance, certainty, and even the meaning of the title. The soldiers move through ruined towns, temporary relationships, military hospitals, black markets, and moments of kindness that rarely last. George Peppard, George Hamilton, Eli Wallach, James Mitchum, and others appear as men shaped differently by the same campaign. The episodic structure can feel almost like a collection of memories, some tender, some bitter, and some deliberately unresolved. Its most famous sequence is also its coldest. An American deserter is executed in a snowy field, while a cheerful holiday song plays over the images. The contrast is not subtle, and it is not meant to be. Foreman turns ceremony into accusation. Clean uniforms, formal commands, and falling snow cannot disguise the fact that a young man is being removed by the same institution he once served. Later, the soldiers enter a defeated Germany where survival, revenge, desire, and exhaustion mix together. The final scene takes place in post-war Berlin, where two former Allied soldiers meet in a dark street and a meaningless confrontation erupts. The war is officially over, yet violence continues because the men have carried it inside them. Dunkirk ends with rescue, and a newspaper speech that offers national meaning. The Victors distrusts meaning delivered too easily. Its wide European journey is filled with movement, but the characters do not arrive at moral clarity. The film's scale comes from accumulation. One road, one ruined room, one compromise after another. It is an epic of aftermath beginning before the fighting has even stopped, and its bitter title may be the sharpest weapon it carries. Number 11. The Big Red One. Samuel Fuller did not need to pretend war was clean, because he had lived through the campaigns he filmed. The Big Red One, released in 1980, follows a veteran sergeant and four young soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division from North Africa to Sicily, Normandy, Belgium, and Czechoslovakia. Lee Marvin gives the sergeant the stillness of a man who has survived by refusing unnecessary emotion. The movie is episodic, moving from one strange pocket of war to another. A soldier helps deliver a baby inside a tank. Men fight through an asylum where the patients wander among the combatants. A battlefield cross made from a rifle marks a temporary grave. Fuller balances horror with absurdity because, in his view, the two often occupy the same space. The D-Day sequence is famous for its simplicity. The sergeant watches the wristwatch of a fallen soldier as the tide rises around it. Time continues while men disappear. There is no need for a giant aerial view. One object explains the cost. The later liberation of a concentration camp is even more direct. A young prisoner repeatedly reaches for food, and the sergeant carries him while striking a guard again and again, as though action might reverse what has already happened. Fuller's original cut was heavily shortened, but the reconstructed version reveals the intended scale and rhythm of the journey. The same small group keeps moving while the world around them changes. Dunkirk creates immersion through technical precision. The Big Red One creates truth through blunt memory. Its battles may not always be enormous, yet the campaign feels vast because the men cross so much ground and lose so many versions of themselves. The sergeant's lesson is brutally plain. Surviving is the only glory war reliably offers. Number 10. Cross of Iron. Mud replaces glory in Sam Peckinpah's Cross of Iron, released in 1977. Set on the Eastern Front, the film follows Sergeant Steiner, played by James Coburn, a hardened German soldier respected by his men and suspicious of authority. His new commander, Captain Stransky, wants the Iron Cross not for courage, but for status. The conflict between them becomes more dangerous than the enemy beyond the trenches. Stransky needs witnesses to support a false claim of heroism. Steiner refuses to cooperate, knowing that vanity at headquarters can be as deadly as artillery at the front. Maximilian Schell gives Stransky polished arrogance, while Coburn makes Steiner look exhausted by every institution that claims to own him. The battle sequences are fragmented, smoky, and physical. Men move through ruined positions as explosions throw earth rather than neat sparks. The famous retreat through contested ground turns survival into confusion. German and Soviet lines blur, communications fail, and Steiner's group must navigate a landscape where command has lost meaning. Peckinpah's editing repeats impacts and movements, making time feel damaged. Yet the film's most memorable moment comes at the end, when Stransky admits he does not know how to reload his weapon and asks Steiner to show him. Steiner begins laughing. The laughter grows while images and words remind us how absurdly power has spent human life. Dunkirk avoids showing enemy personalities. Cross of Iron places the audience inside a collapsing enemy army and finds no comfort there. It is not interested in redemption through uniforms. It is interested in class, ego, survival, and the machinery that allows ambitious men to endanger braver ones. The result is an anti-epic epic, large in violence, narrow in hope, and unforgettable because it laughs at the very idea of clean heroism. Number 9. The Thin Red Line. Before Terrence Malick's famous adaptation, Andrew Martin directed a leaner version of The Thin Red Line in 1964. Based on James Jones's novel, it follows American soldiers fighting for a heavily defended position on Guadalcanal. Keir Dullea plays Private Dahl, whose fear, anger, and instinct for survival pull him into conflict with Jack Warden's Sergeant Welsh. The film does not offer a comfortable group of instantly lovable heroes. Dahl takes a weapon from another man because he believes he needs it. Welsh understands that battle reduces morality to decisions made under pressure, yet he still tries to hold the unit together. Their relationship gives the campaign a harsh personal center. The major set piece is the assault on a ridge known as the Dancing Elephant. Soldiers climb through exposed ground while defensive fire cuts across the slope. The terrain seems to grow steeper with every step. Rather than presenting the hill as a glorious objective, the movie shows it as a piece of earth that commands human sacrifice simply because maps say it matters. Once the position is reached, exhaustion replaces celebration. The men search bunkers, confront prisoners, and discover that taking ground does not explain why they had to become different people to take it. Dahl's transformation is especially unsettling. Fear does not disappear. It changes into aggression. Dunkirk asks viewers to experience battle without much access to the characters' inner lives. This earlier Thin Red Line pushes directly into those inner conflicts. Its scale is smaller than Malick's later version, but its black and white images, rugged locations, and hard moral arguments give it old-school force. The film treats courage not as purity, but as movement despite terror, and sometimes as something uncomfortably close to rage. Number 8. Stalingrad. Cold becomes a sentence in Stalingrad, the German film released in 1993. It follows a group of soldiers who leave relative comfort in Italy and enter the battle that will trap an entire army. Thomas Kretschmann plays Lieutenant von Witzland, an officer whose remaining faith in military order collapses as the campaign turns into starvation, isolation, and abandonment. The early factory fighting is staged as chaos inside shattered buildings. Walls no longer separate rooms. Visibility changes with every blast, and soldiers struggle to identify where the front line exists. A confrontation involving Soviet prisoners exposes the moral decay surrounding the men, while von Witzland's attempts to act honorably become increasingly dangerous. The film's most powerful transformation arrives with winter. The colors drain away. Vehicles stop moving. Food becomes more valuable than rank. Men who once advanced confidently now search for shelter and rumors of evacuation. At an airfield, crowds press toward the last aircraft, while wounded soldiers and officers compete for places. The scene destroys the myth that military hierarchy remains stable during collapse. Later, the survivors cross a white landscape that appears endless. Their enemy is no longer only the Soviet army. It is cold, hunger, command failure, and the shrinking belief that anyone outside the encirclement intends to save them. The final images are quiet because there is nothing left to announce. Dunkirk builds toward rescue from a trapped army. Stalingrad moves in the opposite direction. Every possible exit closes. Its large production, winter locations, armor, crowds, and ruined city create an epic scale, but the viewpoint remains close to ordinary soldiers. The movie does not ask viewers to admire their cause. It asks them to witness what happens when propaganda, ambition, and obedience lead human beings into a frozen graveyard. Number 7. Winter War. Snow hides the battlefield until it suddenly erupts in Pekka Parikka's Winter War, released in 1989. The Finnish epic follows reservists from the region of Ostrobothnia as they leave farms and families to face the Soviet invasion of 1939. Instead of building the story around one legendary commander, it stays close to a group of ordinary men trying to hold positions against a much larger force. The early scenes establish community before combat. Brothers and neighbors enter the same unit, bringing familiar jokes and local habits into military life. That familiarity becomes painful as the company is gradually reduced. The film understands that a casualty is not merely a missing uniform, it is a gap in a village waiting at home. Its battle sequences are enormous. Soviet artillery tears across snowy tree lines, infantry advances through open ground, and tanks push toward trenches defended by men with limited equipment. One famous sequence shows Finnish soldiers attempting to stop armor at close range. The snow makes every movement visible, while smoke and earth stain the white landscape. The running time allows exhaustion to accumulate. Positions are defended, lost, and defended again. Men eat when they can, sleep beside danger, and receive orders that sound impossible, because the larger situation is impossible. There is bravery, but little romantic posing. Dunkirk uses a limited timeline to create urgency. Winter War shows what happens when urgency lasts for months. Its practical armies, explosions, period weapons, forests, and weather give it a scale rarely seen outside major English-language productions. More importantly, the film preserves a national memory without turning every soldier into a statue. These men are funny, afraid, stubborn, and mortal. The epic power comes from watching them continue, while the winter seems determined to erase them. Number 6. Come and See. Few war films are harder to forget than Elem Klimov's Come and See, released in 1985. The story follows Floria, a Belarusian boy who digs up a rifle and joins partisan fighters, imagining that war will transform him into an adult. Instead, it strips childhood from his face with terrifying speed. The film begins with nervous energy and moments of strange humor. Floria poses with the weapon and leaves home despite his mother's despair. After an aerial attack separates him from the partisans, he wanders through forests and villages with Glasha, a young woman equally unprepared for what surrounds them. Sound becomes unstable, faces stare into the camera, and reality starts feeling like a nightmare that refuses to end. The most famous sequence takes place in a village gathered under occupation. Klimov avoids glamorous battle choreography. He focuses on confusion, trapped civilians, music, shouting, and Floria's helpless viewpoint. The horror comes from witnessing organized cruelty without the protective distance of an action spectacle. The camera remains close enough to make escape feel impossible. By the end, Floria appears decades older. He fires at a portrait of Hitler while historical images move backward, as if rage could reverse the chain of events. But the montage finally reaches infancy, and he cannot continue. Even after everything, the film refuses the fantasy that history can be undone by one act. Dunkirk is a masterclass in controlled suspense. Come and See is something more disturbing, an attack on the audience's emotional defenses. Its epic scale comes from memory, landscape, crowds, sound, and the sense that one child is walking through the suffering of an entire country. This is not a film to casually enjoy. It is a film that changes the meaning of every polished war adventure watched afterward. Number 5. Battle of Neretva. A bridge becomes the center of an entire campaign in Battle of Neretva, the massive Yugoslav epic released in 1969. Set during the Axis offensive against Yugoslav partisans in 1943, the film follows fighters, civilians, wounded soldiers, and commanders attempting to escape encirclement near the Neretva River. The cast stretches across nations and styles. Yul Brynner, Franco Nero, Hardy Kruger, Sergei Bondarchuk, Orson Welles, and local stars appear inside a production filled with troops, artillery, aircraft, horses, villages, and mountain roads. Yet the story's emotional core is the column of wounded people slowing the retreat. Leaving them behind would improve the army's chances, but doing so would destroy the values the partisans claim to defend. The famous sequence involves the bridge itself. Tito orders it destroyed, apparently cutting off the only escape route. The decision confuses allies and enemy observers, but it is part of a deception intended to misdirect the encircling forces. The production demolished a real bridge for filming, and the image has the blunt force of reality. Steel and structure collapse into the river, while entire armies reconsider the map. Later, a temporary crossing must be created under pressure, as the wounded and fighters move through the valley. The scale is astonishing, but the film keeps returning to faces within the mass. Every wagon and stretcher makes the strategic problem human. Dunkirk is also an evacuation epic, but Battle of Neretva adds mountains, ideology, deception, and a moving population to the equation. Its ambition is reckless. This is cinema built with landscapes, machinery, and thousands of bodies in motion. The result may be uneven, but when the bridge falls and the column advances, it delivers the kind of physical grandeur modern war films usually simulate. Number 4. The Unknown Soldier. For Finland, The Unknown Soldier is more than a popular war film. It became part of national memory. Edvin Laine's 1955 adaptation of Väinö Linna's novel follows a machine gun company during the continuation war against the Soviet Union. Instead of worshipping commanders, it listens to conscripts from different regions, classes, and temperaments. The men argue, joke, complain about food, question orders, and form bonds that make later absences painfully noticeable. Their speech and behavior preserve individual identity inside an institution built on uniformity. Rocca, the fearless farmer and soldier, becomes the standout figure because he treats military ceremony with skepticism while displaying extraordinary battlefield skill. The famous ambush sequence shows Rocca facing a large advancing force with a machine gun. The scene is not presented as polished superhero action. It is rough, noisy, and rooted in position, patience, and experience. His effectiveness embarrasses officers who value rules more than results, sharpening the movie's distrust of empty authority. Across its long running time, the company advances and retreats through forests, roads, trenches, and villages. Success never lasts. Promotions do not protect anyone. Humor remains essential because it is the only thing the men can control. The movie's black and white images have the directness of collective recollection, as though the country is remembering voices rather than monuments. Dunkirk turns soldiers into an anonymous mass to express shared survival. The Unknown Soldier achieves the opposite effect. It pulls personalities out of the mass until viewers understand that no soldier is truly unknown to the people beside him. Its battles are practical and broad, but its greatest scale is social. An entire nation's accents, tensions, loyalties, and grief, carried by one company marching toward an ending history, has already chosen. Number 3. Patton. Before the first battlefield appears, George C. Scott stands before an enormous American flag and dares the audience to look away. Patton, released in 1970, is not simply a biography of a general. It is a portrait of military genius, ego, theater, discipline, and self-destruction, occupying the same uniform. The film follows General George S. Patton through North Africa, Sicily, France, and the final drive into Germany. Scott plays him as a man convinced that history is watching every gesture. He studies ancient campaigns, demands speed, and understands armored movement with remarkable instinct. At the same time, his temper and hunger for glory repeatedly threaten his position. The opening speech is the iconic scene, but the Tunisian tank battle proves the movie's epic reach. Armor moves across open ground while aircraft attack above, artillery reshapes the landscape, and Patton watches a plan become physical. He believes he understands his opponent so completely that battle feels like a conversation conducted through machines. The hospital incidents reveal the limit of that confidence. Patton confronts soldiers suffering from combat stress and mistakes invisible injury for cowardice. The scenes are uncomfortable because the film refuses to excuse him. The same certainty that makes him effective in movement makes him destructive when facing pain he cannot recognize. Dunkirk nearly removes commanders from the frame. Patton places one commander at the center and asks whether a war can need qualities that peace cannot tolerate. Its widescreen locations, real armor, mass formations, and Jerry Goldsmith's score create old-school grandeur. Yet Scott's face remains the largest battlefield. By the end, victory has arrived, but Patton already senses that the world moving forward may have no place for the warrior he built himself to become. Number 2. A Bridge Too Far. Confidence becomes catastrophe one bridge at a time. In A Bridge Too Far, Richard Attenborough's 1977 reconstruction of Operation Market Garden. The plan sounds brilliantly simple. Airborne troops will seize a chain of bridges in the Netherlands, allowing ground forces to drive rapidly into Germany. The problem is that nearly every assumption must be correct. The film uses a vast international cast without pretending one star controls events. Sean Connery, Anthony Hopkins, Gene Hackman, James Caan, Michael Caine, Robert Redford, Dirk Bogarde, and many others represent units scattered across the operation. Intelligence warnings are minimized, radios fail, roads become blocked, and lightly armed paratroopers encounter stronger resistance than planners expected. The Nijmegen River crossing is the signature sequence. American soldiers paddle fragile canvas boats across open water under intense fire because the bridge cannot be taken from one side alone. The camera holds wide views of the river, then cuts close to hands, paddles, fear, and exhaustion. There is no illusion that courage makes the men untouchable. Their advance is magnificent precisely because it looks almost impossible. At Arnhem, British troops hold a bridge while supplies disappear, and relief remains painfully distant. Buildings become defensive positions, wounded men fill basements, and the map's clean arrows collapse into street-level confusion. The title finally lands as judgment rather than poetry. Dunkirk makes failure feel elemental and anonymous. A bridge too far shows exactly how failure is assembled through optimism, hierarchy, bad communication, weather, timing, and resistance. Its thousands of uniforms, real aircraft drops, armor columns, bridges, boats, and Dutch locations create a scale few productions have matched. More importantly, the spectacle never hides the central truth. Bravery can rescue people from a flawed plan, but it cannot magically make the plan wise. Number 1. The Longest Day. No other old-school Second World War epic combines scale, clarity, and human detail quite like The Longest Day. Released in 1962 and based on Cornelius Ryan's account of D-Day, the film reconstructs the Normandy invasion from American, British, French, and German viewpoints. It does not build toward the landing through one invented hero. It builds through an entire continent holding its breath. The cast is enormous, yet the structure remains readable. Paratroopers drift away from landing zones. Resistance fighters receive coded messages. German officers debate whether the invasion is real. Commandos approach bridges. Rangers climb cliffs, and soldiers wait inside landing craft while the coast moves closer. Among many famous sequences, the assault on the Ouistreham casino stands out. A long aerial tracking shot follows French commandos racing through streets under fire, turning a complicated urban attack into one continuous visual statement. Elsewhere, the capture of Pegasus Bridge unfolds with speed and precision, while the climb at Pointe du Hoc makes the cliffs appear almost vertical. The beach scenes are less intimate than Dunkirk's, but their geographical clarity is extraordinary. Viewers see obstacles, defensive positions, exits, and the terrible distance between water and cover. Practical explosions, real landscapes, aircraft, ships, and masses of extras create images that still feel like recorded events, rather than designed backgrounds. Dunkirk is sharper, louder, and more subjective. The Longest Day is broader, calmer, and more confident that the audience can follow history without being forced into constant panic. It shows generals and privates, mistakes and miracles, comedy and loss. That balance earns it number 1. Nolan made viewers feel one evacuation. This epic makes them understand how thousands of separate actions opened an entire front, and why one day could contain enough courage, confusion, and consequence to fill a lifetime. So, does Dunkirk still rule the battlefield, or did these older epics do more with real machines, giant casts, and stories that trusted viewers to pay attention? Tell us which film should have ranked higher, and name the classic we missed. Like the video, share it with someone who loves serious war cinema, and subscribe for more forgotten masterpieces. Until next time, remember, newer technology can increase the noise, but it cannot manufacture weight, courage, or memory.